In a moment that captured the nation's attention, President Donald Trump made a stunning announcement from the White House, sending shockwaves through the political landscape and across the country. He declared a state of public safety emergency in Washington, D.C., a move that immediately set the Capitol on high alert and prompted urgent responses from local and federal agencies alike. In an unprecedented step, the president placed the city's Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, bypassing the usual chain of command and centralizing authority in the executive branch. Simultaneously, National Guard troops were deployed throughout the city, their presence unmistakable as they patrolled key intersections, government buildings, and residential neighborhoods. This sweeping action asserts federal power over D.C., a city with a long and complex relationship with the federal government, often at the center of debates about autonomy and statehood. President Trump described his actions as necessary to restore order and ensure public safety, going so far as to declare this day Liberation Day in D.C., a phrase that quickly dominated headlines and social media. The decision comes after a week marked by heightened federal law enforcement activity in the Capitol, with agencies working around the clock to respond to escalating tensions and public demonstrations. By invoking specific legal authorities, the president has temporarily stripped the local D.C. government of its command over its police force, raising significant legal and constitutional questions. The sight of National Guard troops on city streets has sparked debate and concern, highlighting the delicate balance of power between federal and local authorities in the nation's capital. For D.C. residents, daily life has been upended. Their routines, sense of security, and even their civil liberties now feel subject to a new force directed from the White House, leaving many uncertain about what comes next. As the city adjusts to this extraordinary situation, the implications of the president's proclamation will continue to unfold in the days and weeks ahead, shaping the future of Washington, D.C. and its people. Placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under federal control marks a profound shift in the city's governance and daily life. For decades, the District of Columbia has maintained a delicate balance between local authority and federal oversight, but this move tips the scales dramatically. Residents and city officials alike are grappling with what this means for their autonomy and sense of security. President Trump appointed U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi to oversee the department, effectively making her the acting police chief. This unprecedented appointment places a federal official at the helm of local law enforcement, bypassing the city's usual chain of command and raising questions about accountability and local input. The order is set to last for 30 days, but Congress holds the power to extend it if deemed necessary. This temporary measure could become a longer-term reality, depending on how events unfold and how lawmakers respond to the situation on the ground. National Guard troops will begin arriving in waves, working alongside D.C. police to establish a stronger, more visible security presence throughout the city. Their deployment is intended to deter unrest and reassure the public, but it also signals a new era of heightened federal involvement. This military presence fundamentally changes the Capitol's atmosphere. For some residents, the sight of troops in armored vehicles brings a sense of safety and order. For others, it's a stark reminder of lost freedoms and a source of anxiety, as the city feels more like a fortress than a community. Approximately 120 FBI agents will be reassigned to nighttime patrols, dramatically increasing the federal law enforcement presence on city streets after dark. Their mission: to deter crime, gather intelligence, and support local officers in maintaining order during these uncertain times. By combining D.C. police, the National Guard, and federal agents, authorities are creating a centralized security force with unprecedented coordination. This multi-agency approach is designed to respond quickly to any threat, but it also blurs the lines between local and federal responsibilities. President Trump also mandated the removal of homeless individuals from areas near the city center, promising alternative accommodations far from the Capitol. The administration claims this is necessary for public safety and the city's image, but the logistics and human impact of such a move remain unclear. This plan has drawn immediate and vocal criticism from homeless advocates, who argue that it criminalizes poverty and displaces vulnerable people without addressing the root causes of homelessness. Protests and legal challenges are already underway. In a further move, the president declared that Washington, D.C. would no longer be a sanctuary city for undocumented immigrants. This policy shift means local authorities must now cooperate fully with federal immigration enforcement, a dramatic change from previous practice. This decision injects the national debate over immigration directly into D.C.'s local affairs, intensifying tensions and sparking new protests from immigrant rights groups and their supporters. The federal intervention is being framed by the administration as a rescue mission, a necessary step to impose a tougher approach to law and order in the face of rising unrest and uncertainty. The president's decision is seen by his supporters as a bold and decisive step to restore law and order in the nation's capital, projecting strength and resolve at a time of crisis. Supporters argue that public safety outweighs concerns about local autonomy, while critics warn that these measures set a dangerous precedent for federal overreach and the erosion of local self-governance. The city now stands at a crossroads, its future shaped by decisions made far beyond its borders. President Trump justified his decision by painting a grim picture of Washington, D.C. as besieged by crime. He cited specific incidents, like the assault of a former White House staffer, to bolster his case. This incident became a symbol of the alleged breakdown of order. The president criticized local government for failing to protect citizens, framing federal intervention as necessary. The federal takeover is positioned as a rescue mission to restore safety. The administration argues that D.C. has reached a tipping point, requiring an extraordinary response. By invoking Section 740 of the D.C. homeruleact, the president uses a legal tool for emergencies. This sets the stage for a dramatic exercise of presidential power. Local D.C. officials reacted swiftly and negatively to President Trump's announcement. Mayor Murielbowser condemned the move, calling it hyperbolic and politically motivated. She defended her administration's record on public safety and accused the president of using the city as a political pawn. D.C. council members echoed the mayor's outrage, arguing that a military-style occupation is not the answer. They expressed concern that federal intervention would undermine community policing efforts. Democratic leaders nationwide voiced opposition, calling it an abuse of power. They highlighted D.C.'s unique political status and called for congressional hearings. However, the president's move found support among his allies, who praised it as necessary to restore order. Supporters argue that the federal government has a responsibility to ensure the capital's security. This support underscores the deep political divisions around crime and policing. A fundamental disagreement over crime statistics fuels this controversy. The Trump administration claims a dramatic increase in crime, while official data shows a decrease. According to the Department of Justice, violent crime in D.C. reached a 30-year low in 2024. Critics accuse the president of manufacturing a crisis for political gain. The administration questions the validity of official data, aligning with police unions who claim data manipulation. This creates a battle over which facts the public should believe. Is the city experiencing a crime wave, or is the president fabricating a crisis? The answer depends on which sources of information one trusts. The National Guard is a unique reserve force made up of citizen soldiers who serve both their communities and their country. In most states, the Guard operates under the authority of the state governor, who can deploy them for emergencies like natural disasters, civil unrest, or other crises. This dual role means the Guard can be called to serve both state and federal missions, depending on the situation. However, Washington, D.C. is different from the 50 states. Here, the President of the United States has direct and exclusive authority over the D.C. National Guard, bypassing any local or mayoral control. This means that decisions about deploying the Guard in the nation's capital rest solely with the president. This unique command structure is a legacy of the city's founding, reflecting the federal government's desire to maintain control over the capital and ensure its security, especially during times of national crisis or unrest. The president's authority to take over the D.C. police force is rooted in the D.C. Home Rule Act, a law that outlines the limited self-governance granted to the district and the federal government's retained powers. Specifically, Section 740 of the Act allows the president to assume direct control over local law enforcement and the National Guard in the event of an emergency, giving the federal government broad powers to respond quickly. However, the definition of what constitutes an emergency is intentionally broad and open to interpretation, leaving room for debate and controversy over when and how these powers should be used. President Trump has recently invoked this section by declaring a public safety emergency in D.C., using it as justification for deploying federal forces and the National Guard to the city's streets. This is not the first time President Trump has used federal forces in a controversial manner. Previous deployments in other U.S. cities have sparked heated debates about the appropriate use of federal power. Looking back at past actions provides important context for understanding today's move in D.C., highlighting a pattern of federal intervention during times of unrest. The president's willingness to use federal power in American cities demonstrates a consistent approach to addressing crises, often prioritizing national security and public order over local autonomy. These actions raise significant questions about the balance of power between federal and local governments, and whether the president's authority should have clear limits in the Capitol. As legal and political battles begin to unfold, the nation will be watching closely to see how this unprecedented use of presidential authority in D.C. shapes the future of federal and local relations. The events in D.C. are part of a broader landscape of national and international developments. An upcoming summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin is a key item on the president's agenda. The D.C. takeover could be seen as a strategic move to project power before the meeting. Domestically, the administration finalized a major economic policy with semiconductor manufacturers NVIDIA and AMD. The companies agreed to a tariff on revenue from chip sales to China in exchange for export licenses. These events provide context for understanding the president's actions in D.C. The federalization of the D.C. police is part of a larger pattern of executive-driven actions. The move is consistent with a presidency challenging established norms. Whether seen as decisive leadership or overreach, it reflects the administration's ambitious agenda. Supporters of President Trump's crackdown in D.C. argue it's essential for public safety. They claim the local government lost control, justifying federal intervention. A strong law enforcement presence is seen as a deterrent to crime. The federal government has a special interest in ensuring the Capitol's security. Critics argue the move is an undemocratic overreach of power. They point to decreasing crime statistics and accuse the president of manufacturing a crisis. The intervention is viewed as a politically motivated attack on a democratic city. Opponents express concern about the militarization of the city. They highlight orders to remove the homeless and end sanctuary status as politically driven. The federal takeover is seen as an authoritarian act threatening civil liberties. With federal control in place, D.C. enters a period of uncertainty. The implementation of the president's order will define the immediate future. Residents will watch how the presence of soldiers changes their neighborhoods. Legal challenges to the president's authority are expected. Congress will become a battleground, with Democrats calling for hearings. The impact of this move will ripple beyond D.C., affecting national debates on crime and policing. It raises questions about the balance of power between federal, state, and local governments. The coming days will be critical in determining the outcome of this dramatic chapter. The world will watch how this unfolds in D.C., Congress, and the courts. For D.C. residents, their city is once again the epicenter of a national controversy.